I'm Haley. I'm a pastor from Mississippi living in Arkansas and doing really awesome, cool things with my life.
And I'm David, and I don't have no other to describe myself, but I'm having an identity crisis. And this is the Happy Hippie Jesus Show with Jeremy and Bill.
Exactly. I think this is a first for us. We've literally caused a guest to have an identity crisis by giving them the freedom to introduce however they want it.
Well, I mean, maybe I should have said I'm a beautiful child of God.
That's right.
That can be true, and you can be having an identity crisis at the same time.
We cannot be confined to only a few words.
Yes. So Bill will pay your therapy bills because we're sorry for causing that. And if you really want to get back at him, I know the perfect way to do it. Okay. See, Bill thinks Jesus is a hippie, and I think he's got the worst Christology ever. So you can set him straight and maybe get even for your identity crisis.
So do you guys think Jesus is a hippie?
I don't know. I thought about this question. I mean, if I were to categorize Jesus as a hippie, I would say that Jesus is a hippie because it was down with the empire, down with the establishment, and that's kind of the quintessential hippie in my mind, those people fighting.
Or he could be Luke Skywalker.
Totally.
Or Rage Against the Machine.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think I like the metaphor, except it breaks down when you think, like Rob Bell says, his dad always said, all the hippies have straight teeth. And he always pointed out, like, whenever they saw hippies, he's like, they all have straight teeth, meaning, like, they all grew up in privileged homes and then rebelled against their privilege. And I don't think Jesus, like, came from a place of privilege. So other than that little Rob Bellism, I think, if he's fighting against the man.
No, wait a minute. I never had braces. And so, I mean, you were pigeonholing people with straight teeth.
I did. Listen, it's Rob Bell's dad.
Tell me a story that maybe shapes how you understand Jesus. It can be from the Bible, from your own life. You can just make it up right now while we're talking. But a story that'll shed some light on how you understand Jesus.
I think something that we've talked before at First Methodist in downtown is the way that Jesus is always calling for people to eat together. And I think one of the stories that we've talked about in particular about Jesus was the come have breakfast with me. And that tends to be one of my favorite stories to talk about, as in that after that long night, it wasn't anything but, hey, come have breakfast with me. And I think the table, is a foundation of my own ministry and of my own kind of heartbeat. And I love to center around who Jesus is around the table. So come have breakfast with me. It's one of my favorite parts of the story of Jesus.
Well, Haley even said it a minute ago. I think my understanding of Jesus always comes from like where Jesus is bumping up against the empire and where Jesus is fighting against the establishment that's controlling people. And then the other, like, this is going to sound really strange, but one of the things that kind of opened my eyes to understanding the Gospels in a different way was reading the book Lamb, which is, it's like a story of Jesus's childhood friend Biff. And it's this fictional story about Jesus and his friend Biff. And it's absolutely hilarious and completely made up and fantasy. But it was so well researched and so well put together that then reading the Gospels, I understood the background of the Gospels better from this really well researched fiction.
Is it the same Biff as from Back to the Future, or a different Biff?
I believe it's different.
But he did have the time machine for just a bit.
Oh, that's right, he did.
Yeah.
He made like a tree and leaf and got out of there.
You're doing some really cool stuff downtown with a coffee shop. Mm-hmm. So I'm just going to give you the floor, and you can tell us what that is and how it kind of unfolded.
Yeah, right. So I think coffee shop's a pretty broad word for what we're creating downtown. But, I mean, we like to think of it as First Cup Community Café. And First Cup has been around at the church for a while now, but it hasn't looked like it does. It was just a space for people who arrive on Sunday to kind of have a cup of coffee and a pastry in between services or chatting with people who are already members of the church. But several months ago, I think it was, I guess back in November, we started to have this conversation about what does it mean to create a space where people feel welcome to come and rest a while, whether that's church members or small groups or Sunday school classes or Bible studies. But for my role in particular, what does it mean to make a welcoming space for our neighbors? We call our friends downtown our neighbors as a way of recognizing that we are a part of this community together. So we wanted to create this space where the building wasn't as intimidating as it is from the outside. And so a couple of months ago, we decided to move the First Cup Café from the back of the building to the front, just right on the street level. You can see the window from Center Street. And I started having my community assistance hours in the cafe, offering coffee and snacks and whatever kind of folks needed to meet their immediate needs. And then we would go from there. And it's been an opportunity for us to discover the many ways that the system is against all of our neighbors, talking about the empire. We've tried to help with birth certificates and IDs and dental appointments and gasoline when people are kind of trapped. We work a lot with partners in the city, Family Promise, our Arkansas Advocates, and Our House Shelter as well. So really the cafe has been an opportunity for us to kind of throw open our doors and say, you two are welcome in this space. And even if you haven't felt that way in the past, now's the time in which we will kind of love abundantly.
So was there obstacles in moving the cafe? I mean, no one in the church ever resists change, so I can't imagine.
Right. What church are you at? No, I'm just kidding. Churches are complicated places, right? And change is always difficult no matter where we are. But I think one of the conversations that we've been having a lot is kind of what is radical welcome in downtown Little Rock, and what does that look like? And I think sustainability is always a question. I was just talking with one of my volunteers before I came over here, is like, what does it look like for this cafe to be a sustainable project or a sustainable ministry, and not just like a fun short-term project where, I wanted to hang around with people, but having volunteers come in as a part of the ministry and shifting spaces has always a challenge. And so moving something from the back to the front and making it more obvious gets all kinds of friends coming in, checking on it and seeing what's going on and inquiring about it. So I think we've probably seen an influx of folks, which always presents challenges and concerns and that kind of thing. So
change is not just difficult in the church.
Right, absolutely.
I mean,
absolutely.
I can't change my kids' bedtime or anything else. It all creates a challenge. So how did you shape and prepare like a church for change? Or how can you use your voice on a Sunday to help prepare a congregation to move in a different direction?
Well, when we talk about this a lot. I mean, we talk about this in almost every meeting, whether it's finance or some different ministry team or whatever. We talk about these kinds of things a lot. I grew up in this church. This was the church was my home church, and so I had a lot of political capital, if you will, or credibility coming into it. But kind of knowing the story of this church's relationship with downtown was really helpful. So, when I was a kid, like a small child, I remember hearing people around the church refer to people who are on the street who are homeless or more transient. They would refer to them as bums. I mean, that was the word. That was kind of the nomenclature of the church, was the bums, because they would hang out in the alley behind the church and dig through the trash, and then they would come into the building, and then I remember there being a shift, like somewhere, I don't know who it was, somewhere along the way somebody said, like, that's not how we're going to refer to these folks anymore. We're going to refer to them as, I think, like street people was the term from then. I mean, we're talking about, well, I won't tell how old, like early 80s, late 70s. But anyway, there was that shift. But kind of knowing that this church's long progression of how we are a downtown church. So then fast forwarding to becoming the senior pastor, I'd been away for a long time and came back and realized, like, this church has a lot of pride in being a downtown church. But, when all the churches were moving out west, this church takes a lot of pride in staying downtown. I mean, their tagline for a while was downtown for good, which is a great double entendre, but, like, is it a mission statement? And what I realized was we're actually just trying to be a neighborhood church located downtown, and everybody that comes just is driving in to do that. So we started asking the question, what does it mean to be a downtown church? What does it mean to be located in this place and to be more than just a historic, beautiful building located in downtown, but how do we exist in this neighborhood? We started talking a lot about neighbors. We did a series on neighboring. Through that, we discovered there was a lot of energy behind the word neighbor over the word disciple. And Haley said we started using the word neighbor. So we use the word neighbor or neighboring instead of disciple and discipleship, because Jesus says, loving God and loving your neighbor are pretty much the same thing. They go hand in hand. You can't do one without the other. And so we talk a lot about that. So that was one of the big shifts when people started thinking about neighbors. And then we started really looking at who are our neighbors downtown. Is it McDonald's? Is it this insurance business? Is it the bar right down the street? And these are our neighbors. So how are we in relationship with them? And a lot of our neighbors are our people who are homeless. And one of the things they've been doing for a long time, we're giving out bus passes, which was really needed. We gave out bus passes to people who were looking for jobs, but it felt very transactional. And it felt like, you come here, prove to us that you are in need, sit in this uncomfortable chair and wait for us, and we may give you a bottle of water if we have some. And that worked for a while, and it helped this church open its doors in a way. And I don't want to knock what those people were doing in that, because it really was great. But we even used the word client. I mean, like, these are our clients, and that didn't feel good. So we began talking about that, and we began trying to shape it differently. And then Haley came along, and it really helped us with our fresh eyes and kind of a more expanded, beautiful vision for this. We're kind of able to open those doors, and it really has. The church has responded incredibly. I mean, our church, there's been no bumps with the congregation. The bumps have been through just staff stuff, I think.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. The Bible is a lot of things, but I think one of the chief things it is God meeting people where they are and saying, take one step closer to me.
Right.
And I think you just described, like, God meeting that church where it was and just saying, take one step. And then there was another step and another step. And all those steps are good, and all those steps are moving forward from where you were to where God calls you to be, and they're all necessary. How has working on this project and doing community assistance hours and Fresh Up, how has that shaped your understanding of Jesus?
Yeah, I mean, I think it's certainly shaped my understanding of my own faith, but I think it's also shaped my understanding of the church. I think, I'll answer your question first before I just start rambling. It's been really powerful for me to watch the way that power works in relationship. As David mentioned, there's an obvious power dynamic that I don't think is going to go away. I think we have resources available, and those seeking those resources need them. That's an obvious power dynamic. But I think in relationship with Jesus and this cafe is to say we're going to rework those power dynamics as much as we can to meet one another exactly where we are. And I think that's one of the things that we've seen is folks who come in who are regulars in the beginning were very much in a need of something to help them meet their immediate needs. And now they're just simply a part of the community, and we miss them when they're not there or when they're not around to offer any kind of assistance or volunteer. They're missing. And I think that's what it's reshaped for me regarding who Jesus is and what Jesus calls us to do is like live in holy relationship, which means that we have to take a strong look at the power dynamics that we've created amongst ourselves, and how do we shift those in a way that more resemble the kingdom. It's just like how do we approach one another, meet the needs of our neighbors, and then go from there, and not say, just because I have this resource, we're going to give it to you and then go on your way. And I don't think that's not what Jesus was calling us to. But I think most of all, it's really challenged my understanding of who the church is and who the church is supposed to be. I kind of have this vision of what does it mean for local communities to have local churches that are centers of reconciliation, that are centers of good neighboring in a way that helps people meet kind of the holistic needs that they have, whether they're physical or spiritual or mental or emotional. Like, how do we become that place that bridges people across all of our differences and kind of grows in community. And the cafe is only open 2 hours Monday through Wednesday, but those 2 hours offer such deep relationship in new ways that I think the church has never experienced before. And so to have volunteers from First Church come in and work the cafe and to know names and to celebrate when so-and-so gets a job or offer, this or that as a means of helping them, that is a shift and a change and a resemblance of what Jesus is calling us to.
I've got a friend. He'll go to a coffee shop and set up a little sign that says, "I'll buy you a cup of coffee if you tell me a story."
Right.
So I imagine the coffee shop has opened up stories for you guys. If so, is there a story either one of you could share that has been shared with you?
Yeah, well, you want to talk about Miss Kim? I mean, I don't know. That's an interesting story that's always developing. Or No Day is the Same.
Well, Miss Kim, she was referred to Miss Kim. Miss Kim has been one of our neighbors and friends for several months, almost, a couple of years now.
Since I've been there, yeah.
Yeah, so a long time. But she lives on the streets. We don't have her official diagnosis, but I would say it's very much schizophrenia. She gets paranoid around other people, but she's found a place of home at our church. And really, she doesn't like the coffee shop. She doesn't like the cafe because there are other people there. She liked it when she could come and sit in the chairs outside the front office, and we just get her a cup of coffee, bottle of water, whatever snacks we have. But she's there almost every day. And for a while there, she was there like all day, every day, especially when the weather is bad. She disappeared for about a month, and we started to get really worried. And Haley called all the hospitals, and I think, did you call the police?
I didn't call the police. I just checking in on people, yeah.
Yeah, we were just trying to check on her because we were worried. And then, like, all of a sudden, she shows up the next day. And it was like great rejoicing in the kingdom.
I think everybody took a deep breath. Like,
yeah,
whew.
I mean, like we literally had staff member, our maintenance staff was like taking selfies with her, like, look, she's back, and like texting around the staff because it was so great that Miss Kim was back. And we've even seen, like, we have church members who before, like, if we had anybody who looked like they were in need, looked like they were homeless, kind of waiting in that area, they would kind of hurry on into the building, kind of right past them. But Miss Kim was around so long, she just became part of the family, and people were like, oh, hey, it's Miss Kim, and all that. And there's been some issues with Miss Kim. I mean, she's got schizophrenia, and so she really is not stable always. And the other day, she took a bag of Easter eggs and ate all the candy, and we had to, get on to her about that. Like, you can be here, you just can't take stuff. But, it's just those kinds of relationships are really beautiful. And I didn't even tell you this. I ran into Savante the other day in a different part of downtown. I was walking for lunch, and Savante's a guy who comes around almost every day. And it was like I was totally out of context. He greets me, his big smile on his face. He's like, hey! And I was like, hey, Savante! And I was like, yeah, good to see you at 1. And he's like, yeah! And it was just so great that it wasn't just him coming to the church. Like, we were friends in that moment. Yeah. And it wasn't a power dynamic, like you said. It was like, this is a guy that it was just fun to be around.
Yeah, absolutely. Sure. And I think another cool thing about the cafe is that we have Laura and Josh, who are Monday through Wednesday. They're there 1 o'clock. They want to come and just hang out and be a part of the community there. And then one day, they were talking to me about how they could potentially lose their food stamps if they weren't working or volunteering, and they've been longtime job seekers. And, they asked if they could volunteer for 2 hours on Wednesdays occasionally just to kind of keep their volunteer hours up. And I thought that's a perfect way for this cafe to be a community-owned ministry. It's not mine. It's not First Methodist Cafe. This is a cafe for the community to come and sit and rest a while. So they've been volunteers. We write letters saying that they've been volunteering for so many hours this month, and that kind of helps them sustain the necessary things that they need to survive, and that being food stamps. And so I think the other thing that the cafe has taught me is, like, who can give and who can receive. Like, it's not just about First Methodist being the givers. There's so much talent and willingness to serve from people who we always assume are the receivers of our quote unquote goods. But I think Josh and Laura really have taught me that there's so much to learn from people that is unexpected, that we don't know about. But once we give them an opportunity, then the floodgates open for the ways in which we can build and cultivate a meaningful community together.
I'm always interested in nuts and bolts. So on the nuts and bolts of the cafe, could you share a little bit about it? For instance, is this one of those where everything is free, or you pay what you can, or share some of the nuts and bolts about the cafe?
Well, I think, Bill, you're speaking to some of our dreams. I have great big dreams for the cafe and the way that it develops. But right now, the only quote unquote rule that we have is take what you need and leave the rest in love. And so that is an expectation of what intentional community, I think, looks like. So how do we cultivate that together? So right now, everything there that's offered is take what you need to get by until tomorrow and leave the rest for those who come in behind you. And all of that is sponsored by members of the church, whether it's financial donations or actual donations of once they go to the grocery store, they're picking up something too for the cafe, which I think is really important.
Rules are lame.
Yeah, they totally are.
As few rules as possible.
That's right. Yeah.
David, how has this project or some of the other projects shaped how you view Jesus?
I can talk easier about the body of Christ than I can about Jesus in this instance, because I've seen that that come alive, but I see that incarnational love happening. I think whereas Haley sees it more from the side of our neighbors who are there almost every day, what I think is the most beautiful is seeing the people in our church who've engaged with it. So when we were doing bus passes, we were trying to get volunteers to do that and to be a part of that, and it took kind of a very special personality and a very special person, and it was very hard to get volunteers, and nobody really wanted to do it. We have way more volunteers that want to be a part of it, because it's hard to sit in an office and talk to somebody about, show me your letter from your shelter, right, all that stuff. It's easy to say, can I get you a cup of coffee? And so we've had a lot more volunteers doing that. There's one man who's been volunteering, and he's an older gentleman, and about when I first got there, I remember there was somebody came to worship and they slept on the back pew during the service, which I didn't care about. And he kind of made a comment about, we had somebody sleeping back there last week. And
that's
I was like,
normal Sunday in my church.
Right.
Yeah, but they're sleeping for a different reason.
Exactly. Well, we don't know. But anyway, this is that same guy. So he's now volunteering in the cafe. And just last week, we were having a book study right before the cafe opened. And this gentleman was at the book study. And so somebody came in looking for the cafe, and they were a few minutes early. And this guy jumps up and is like, "Oh, let me get you a cup of coffee." And he's totally engaged with it. And so I've just seen this transformation in a lot of our people happen in these relationships, which to me is incarnational love, which is okay, this is who Jesus is in real life, in real ways. That's the stuff that inspires me. That's the stuff that I see. We have this building in downtown. It's a big, beautiful, foreboding castle-like building. And Jesus was always in the margins. And I don't feel like our church was really in the margins. But here, this has helped us form marginal space.
Listening to you, I get the feeling that your dream is that not only are your people volunteering in the cafe, but they are also coming and being at the cafe.
Right. Absolutely.
Are you seeing that already, or is that still the dream process?
Yeah, we're a busybody people, right? So it's difficult for folks to come and just sit down and have a cup of coffee and maybe wait on the potential for conversation. And so right now, most of our church members who do come are working the cafe. But then we have those examples of that where he'll come and, he's not so great at making macaroni and cheese, but he is good at pumping a cup of coffee and walking it over and sitting it down and checking in on them for even a few minutes. And so that's the kind of dynamic that it is right now. But, if we were to dream big, what does it look like for First Cup Community Cafe to truly be a community cafe where other folks downtown can come and have a cup of coffee and potentially pay for a second cup of coffee for whoever comes in behind them? Or how do we create a space where everyone feels welcome? I think it's challenging now not to have it as a serving component, a serving cafe. But I would love to to watch and witness the ways that it could be a place where both paying and not paying customers can sit down at the table together and just enjoy the space for what it is. But that's a big dream. But it's not an unattainable dream, I don't think. It's just a matter of continued transition and transformation. So.
And you have some kind of special training. You spent a couple of years in England, is that right?
Right, yeah. Yeah. So after I graduated from Boston University, I went to Coventry, England.
Name drop.
We do that a lot around the office.
Where I studied under the greats.
I mean, you said it, not me. Moving on, I went to Coventry after graduating and spent 2 years there on the reconciliation ministry team. And Coventry's got a unique story of reconciliation, of being bombed in World War II by the German Luftwaffe. And the cathedral itself was destroyed. And so the leader of that cathedral led the people of the cathedral, not so much of the city, but through a process of reconciliation. And so I do say Coventry is where I really found my true heartbeat of ministry for reconciliation and bridging people across divides and formulating my ideas about what the table means for the church. So,
David, I just want you to know she can name drop all she wants, but she will never have a rockin' beard like you.
That is true.
Yeah.
Nor would she want one.
There is no argument against that, though.
Do you feel the need to name drop anything? Do you want to drop where you went to school? Or
I'm good. No, my ego doesn't need to be inflated. No, I'm just kidding. No.
Welcome
I think I'm just jealous.
Welcome to every day in our office.
See, I'm just thrilled because most of the time on the podcast is me and Bill making fun of each other. But when we have two guests, like, you can make fun of each other.
Here's how I'm going to make fun of her. She. How long have you been out of seminary?
2015.
So 4 years, and you haven't framed your diploma. It just sits on a shelf in her office, which drives me. I'm afraid it's like coffee's going to get spilled on it.
It's because I don't believe my diploma is as important than other things.
Oh, mine hangs center in my office. It's the only good thing I've ever done. I had children, and I went to seminary. That's about all I got.
My college diploma is folded up somewhere in the attic.
No, that gives me anxiety, though.
I have a wallet size of my college diploma. No joke.
You need my credentials? Here you go.
They're in a giant frame.
That's right.
I did a wedding this last weekend, and I was like having a panic attack. I wouldn't be able to find that little thing of paper with your book, number and all that. I was like, all right,
page 40.
Oh yeah. I was like, oh gosh, I'm gonna find this.
Dude, write it in the inside of your book of worship.
See, I learned something on our podcast
there you
today.
Go. I just do like 1,000 weddings and memorize it like me.
Man, I hope not to do 1,000 weddings.
I don't want to. I'm done. Yeah, I'm done.
How or have you seen like some of your neighbors kind of make that transition to become part of your church community, or is that in the dream phase still? And what does that look like?
I think it's been a both and. Yeah.
I think it's a dream for sure. It depends on how you define like part of the community.
Right. Yeah.
Because like Miss Kim is almost there more than some of our staff people. Sure. That's not to knock any of our staff people. It's just that's how much she's there. Yeah. But there's one guy, Savante. He comes to worship almost every week. He hasn't been there the past couple of weeks, but he's part of the worshiping community, and people just know him now as that. And so there's not he's different, he's new, or whatever. It's just part of it. Yeah. But I think it's always a dream, and you're dealing with people who don't stick around long term. So it's hard to dig deep, put deep roots in community.
Right. Yeah. And there's a gentleman who comes to our first word service who was introduced to the church through the Café first and foremost, desperately seeking a birth certificate so he could find housing. And so once we were able to meet that need, he ends up showing up on Sunday, and 4 months later, he becomes a member and is on the hospitality team and just kind of seeks to be a part of the community. And I think that's kind of the dream of what we could be or trying to be as a faith community of coming together for worship on Sundays with all of our different stories, and not it being they're a member of the Café, or they only come Monday through Friday seeking assistance. But how do we make one community that lives faithfully together no matter what you participate in?
Is the cafe where you see that dream lived out the most right now, or is it in other places?
I don't know. I mean, I think there is something to what we're building there, or what's being built, or what's building itself. I don't work very hard on the cafe. It just kind of happens. But I think for me, it's the one spot where we're seeing our Sunday worshiping congregation meet our Monday through Friday congregation. And that is a beautiful thing, because in my experience of church work, that's the hardest thing to do, because life in our community of faith is more than what we're doing on Sunday together. Monday through Saturday matters a great deal. So how do we kind of bridge those two together? And I think we could have all kinds of programs that try to do that, but everything's built on relationship. And so until A meets B in the cafe and hears what they're going through, helps them search the newspaper to find a job, and celebrates when they do find a job, that's the way that will bridge the two communities into one, I think.
God's never still.
Right.
God's
Amen.
moving constantly, and that's the one thing we can say, yeah, God keeps going. But what's next for the cafe or for First Methodist Little Rock?
That's a big question, Bill.
I know.
I mean, we're having kind of a podcast marathon today.
Yeah, we are.
And we've already landed 2 conference exclusives, so no pressure.
Right.
Well, I mean, as you dream, what's the next step?
Well, I think it's a lot of those dreams that we've talked about today. Just one, it becoming a long-term sustainable ministry that people it just kind of happens forever. And then the other is that those relationships continue to grow and change, and that the us and them kind of melts away. It's never going to melt completely away, but it melts away as much as possible. As far as like growing the ministry, I don't know if we've gotten to that level of visioning yet, but I think you even talked about it. Like, what if instead of people stopping by Starbucks in the morning, which I don't want to take any money away from Starbucks or anything like that. I'm not knocking Starbucks, but
down with the empire.
Starbucks has terrible coffee if you drink it black. I mean, you got to put goop in it.
But why not stop by, the community cafe and hang out there, or come after lunch and hang out for a little bit? And no, I mean, eating ramen noodles isn't probably like your ideal lunch, but maybe eventually there's something else that's served, and it actually becomes community in that sense. We are expanding our relationship with Lucy's Place. So Lucy's Place, which is a homeless resource organization for LGBTQ young people, is moving into one of our buildings, and so them being on our campus is going to be a great big thing that opens up a lot of opportunities for us, and it may have some opportunities for the cafe. I don't know. We haven't gotten that far, but I think that's another kind of link in all of this, what it means to be located in this place and resourcing our neighbors, or just being in relationship with our neighbors.
What I love about the cafe is that it's hospitality. Mm-hmm. It is absolutely wonderful hospitality, and that's what people should feel when they enter into our worship spaces and our church buildings. So I've got a really difficult technical question. What kind of coffee do you serve?
K-cups? No, we do on Sundays, but it's just, I don't know.
Would they notice?
Premium.
Would they notice if you replaced it with Folgers crystals?
No.
I would, because I actually like Folgers crystals. But yeah, Haley is a little bit of a coffee snob.
Yes.
And so she's very, very much on that. But we haven't gotten into like serving Kenya double A or anything like that.
Which, is part of the dream. I mean, right now it's just drip coffee, but that meets the basics for a lot of people. But we're not going to get those Starbucks lovers on Sunday without a little bit of extra oomph. So what's the dream of an espresso machine? How do we develop
a French press?
I have some French presses down in the cafe. So yeah, I mean, the logistics of the cafe are growing and aspiring.
Growing.
But simplicity is faithful. That's what I say.
Oh, so we've got a question we've been asking all of our guests recently. David, we're going to make you go first.
Oh, gosh.
You're on the spot.
Haley. Okay. Haley's a superstar. She went to Boston.
Other than making fun of Haley.
Votech for seminary.
Other than making fun of Haley.
Lies.
What's saving your soul right now?
Probably that.
Other than making fun of Haley, what's saving your soul?
What is saving my soul? Is this a trick question? Like, if I don't say Jesus, like, I'm out.
No.
We're going to assume Jesus has already saved your soul and, forgiven your sins and all that.
I mean, it could be something as simple as your audition with ZZ Tops.
Yes, right. It is not my membership in the beard community.
His aspirations to meet Jay-Z.
I do have an
That's
aspiration
saving
to
his
meet
soul
Jay-Z.
every day.
That is my leave the ministry fantasy. Is like I will be
Chaplain
on Jay-Z's entourage. I will be the spiritual advisor. Is not chaplain.
Sorry, spiritual advisor.
Spiritual advisor. For me, I've been doing a lot of work with Brene Brown and her research over the past 4 or 5 years, and that's just been really life-giving and kept me in the church and kept me sane, and it's been really exciting. So that's my name drop.
Name drop.
And I guess for all of our
and anybody who's listened to me preach in the last 5 years will know that, because I preach like every sermon is like, according to my friend Brene, who I've never met, but
but I'm doing research with her.
I read all of our books.
And in case Bill's mom hasn't heard of Brene, she does a lot of research around like shame, vulnerability, wholehearted living.
Right.
Go ahead.
Oh.
Please say your senior pastor's preaching every Sunday.
Yeah.
Boston Seminary.
Thank you, Bill. Thank you.
Going back all over
Where all the
going back
greats
through my
went.
notes from seminary.
Martin Luther King, Anna Howard Shaw. How much further do you want me to go? No. Well, I mean, when I talk about my ministry at First Methodist downtown, like I do talk about the Café, because it's been fun, and it's been just kind of a breath of fresh air in my understanding of how I'm called to live in my own ministry. And so in my own, faithful life, the Café kind of embodies everything that, I think I'm being called to. So I don't know, like, I really like my job as a pastor and pastor of community engagement. That gives me a lot of life, and it's hard, and you can lose hope based on kind of the difficulties that people go through, and walking people through the systems that are so very broken can be very challenging. But I think to know who people are for who they are, and what they want to be, that's what brings me life when hope seems to be far off on the horizon. But other than that, I have this goal of camping or hiking in every state park in Arkansas. That brings me great life. That has nothing to do with work.
How many parks have you gotten to so far?
I think only 6. Even though, and I know that you can't camp or hike in all of them, but you can walk around some of them that are museums. But
I believe hiking is defined as walking.
That's right, exactly. So I'm on a mission.
With fancy boots.
Yes, exactly. Which I wear.
And or a pole.
That's right. Pole optional. No.
Haley, your answer to that when you said your job just tells me that David has been shielding you from charged conference forms all these years.
Well,
so
carry on. Yeah.
If David protects you like that, then I have one last serious question.
Okay.
Do I have to get glasses with clear frames to come on staff?
Well, yeah, no. We ended up one day with mine are like turquoise. They had a hint of turquoise.
I actually got clear thinking, this was my thought, like, well, if I get clear, no one will see them, so they'll not notice that I had to get glasses. And but now everybody notices.
Yeah, how's that worked out?
No, it has not worked out at all. At all. It's just shown my age.
That's right.
People want to get in contact with you guys. How can they do that? And don't worry, we'll put it in the show notes. You don't have to spell out anything.
Bill will put it in the show notes because Bill does all the real work.
1-900.
I was going to say, yeah. 555. Oh, no, I'm just kidding. Call the church.
Yeah, call the church.
Let's hang out.
First United Methodist Church.
Yeah.
Little Rock, Arkansas. There are a lot of First United Methodist churches.
There are a few out there.
Downtown
Our
Little
website
Rock.
is fumclr.org.
Which we have to spell out sometimes.
Don't worry, Bill will put that in the show.
F is in first.
You can't actually say that. It's like
Fumkler is what.
Well,
that's how Siri says it. When I say call the church, it goes, now calling Fumkler.
Well, thank you guys for being on.
Sure.
Doing awesome stuff at the cafe. It's great to talk to you and hear about it.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.